Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And with me finishing up the power conferences yesterday with the ACC, I'll be starting with the mid-majors or the group of six, whatever you want to call it. And we'll be starting with the new Pac-12. Um, it's been gone for a couple of years after it was once a power conference, but still has some really intriguing teams. And with no further ado, let us get into it. Starting off with week one. They don't have any week zero games, and most of their week one games actually have already been picked because I already did those power conferences. But we still have some matchups, although they're not very exciting. Like San Diego State should be Portland State, and Utah State should be where they're playing. But we do have a rivalry game in week one: Wyoming, Colorado State, a former conference matchup when Colorado State was in the Mountain West, obviously. Now in the Pac-12, um, eh, now that they're in the Pac-12, say non-conference game, but still like those games are still being played, and I think Jim Mora in his opening game as Colorado State's head coach gets a huge win, um, to start off the season against a Wyoming team that is one a rival and two in a competing conference in the Mountain West. So moving on to week two, where still some of the games have been picked because some of these schools still are playing power conference teams. But Colorado State should beat I think that's Southern Utah. But a huge matchup here: Memphis, Boise State, the Broncos. Um, have a couple big time non-conference games. Oregon, Memphis. I think they still play Western Michigan, so that'll be a battle for Broncos. This will be a very interesting game. Memphis, one of the threats in the American. Boise State, I feel the top team, at least in most people's eyes, in the Pac-12. And I'm gonna say they get a huge win at home. After last year's stinker loss at the beginning of the year against South Florida, I feel like Boise State's gonna come ready against Memphis. They get a huge win. Then we have UTSA, Texas State, another American versus Pac-12 matchup. And a rivalry in UTSA, Texas State. Two teams very much um in the thick of things. UTSA, I think, is a contender in the American. Texas State, maybe not a contender, but definitely could be there. But I'm gonna say UTSA gets this win, and then Sacramento State, Fresno State, a California rivalry. I mean, it's not really a rivalry because they haven't played a lot, but Sacramento State, this would be their um third um game of their season, and a huge matchup against a Fresno State team that definitely could give them some problems, but I think the Bulldogs get the win. We're on to week three. We're still have some power conference matchups, including some rivalry games between BYU, Colorado State, and Utah State, but um still some games like JMU and San Diego State, another one of those big group of six or mid-major battles that will determine who makes the um playoff this year. JMU did lose a lot of pieces, but did bring in Billy Napier, who, when he was at Louisiana, was known for dominating the Sun Belt. But I think San Diego State at home, and should be a really good team, gets the win. Oregon State, Montana State, um, one of the top schools, one of the top FCS schools, but I think the Beavers gonna win here. Boise State should beat South Dakota. Washington State, I think, will beat Duquesne. Um, Fresno State, San Jose State, another former Mountain West conference game, now turned non-conference game. Mount, both teams, rivalry there in California. I'm gonna say the Bulldogs get this win, and then Texas State going up against another rivalry in Texas with North Texas. I'm gonna say the Bobcats get the win, and right now is a really competitive Pac-12 through 3 weeks. Week 4, one matchup done, but a lot of non-conference games that should be fun, like Colorado State, UTSA. And this is a Colorado State team that should be much improved, but I do think UTSA gets the win. Fresno State Rice, another huge American Pac-12 game that we're seeing a lot of, um, as those are kind of the top two conferences outside of the power conferences. So it will be nice to see how these conferences stack up against each other for ultimately that top spot in the playoffs. I'm going to say Fresno State at home gets the win. Texas State should beat Incarnate Ward. And here it is, Boise State, Western Michigan, the battle of the Broncos. Western Michigan, a threat in the MAC, but I think Boise State, learning from last year against South Florida, where they kind of took an opponent that they didn't think was very good. I feel like this time going on the road to Western Michigan, another mid-major opponent that would boost them heavily, especially if Western Michigan were to go on a run in the MAC, and then that would help them out. Troy, Utah State, two interesting teams. Troy seems to be the favorite in the Sun Belt. Utah State, not a favorite, but could be a sneaky team. But I'll say the Trojans get the win. San Diego State, Toledo, another MAC matchup. I'm going to say the Aztecs get the win. And then Oregon State, UTEP, two schools that were very bad last year, have been for last couple of seasons. But UTEP now in the Mountain West, Oregon State fully in a new Pac-12 with enough teams. I'm going to say the Beavers get the win here. And moving on to week 5 as conference play gets underway for the Pac-12. Utah State, Boise State should be a fun game, but I'm going to say the Broncos go to 4-1 and notch the first conference win of this new Pac-12. Fresno State, Washington State, another one of those new rivalries that definitely could be due to geography and history between the two schools. I'm going to say Fresno State on the road gets a win there. Oregon State, Colorado State. I mean, I'm kind of high on Jim Mora and this Rams team, so I'm going to say they get the win. And then San Diego State, Texas State, two teams, kind of a similar bold. And I'm going to say the Aztecs get a win there. Went on to week 6. Washington State, Utah State, battle of one-win teams. And I'm going to say Utah State gets the win. I'm not high on Washington State, especially after Jimmy Rogers leaves for Iowa State after 1 year. Even though they have had sustained success the last 2 years, it's just with a new head coach for the the second consecutive year with a new head coach, but the third consecutive year with a different head coach after Jake Dickert was there in 23. And it might be a hard season for the Cougs. Boise State, Fresno State, one of those Mountain West rivalries now in the Pac-12. And according to this, the top two teams, I'm going to say Fresno State gets the win. I just feel like, Boise State does have the talent, but I feel like Fresno State, San Diego State, maybe Texas State could potentially make a spot against the Broncos. And then I'm going to say San Diego State goes up to Oregon State and gets a win there, which drops them to 2-4 as the top two, last two programs from the Pac-12 right now are sitting in the second to last and last place. Colorado State, Texas State. I say Texas State at home gets their first Pac-12 conference victory. Fresno State, San Diego State, at the Aztecs, moving to 6-1 and right now, and then Oregon State, Washington State. I'm gonna say the Beavs win this one. Um, to notch their first conference win and would eclipse their win total from last year, which was just 2 wins. So it'd be a pretty nice season if the Beavers were to start 3-4. Iowa State, Utah State, not Iowa State, Utah State, Texas State. I go the Bobcats to win. Washington State, Boise State. I'm gonna have the Broncos to get a win to move to 5-2, and then San Diego State, Colorado State. I'm gonna say the Rams, one of those old Mountain West rivalries, gets a win there. Went on to week 9 as the conference. Really, without many conference games, not many teams in the conference, it is kind of easy to get through the schedule pretty well. Boise State, I think, should beat Texas State. Utah State, Colorado State, I think the Aggies notch a win there. San Diego State, I think, will beat Washington State, and then I think Fresno State gets the win there against Oregon State. Is the Cougs 1-8. Oh, that's a win somehow. Texas State, Oregon State. I'm gonna say the Beavs get a win there. Boise State, Colorado State. A huge matchup. I'm gonna take the Broncos to get a win there, and then Fresno State, Utah State. I'm gonna say the Aggies get back-to-back conference wins. Who did they beat last week? They beat Colorado State. So 2 back-to-back huge conference wins there. Utah State, San Diego State. I'm gonna say the Aztecs get the win there. Fresno State, Texas State. I'm gonna say Fresno State on the road. Colorado State, Washington State. Let's say the Cougs get a win here. They don't go winless in conference play. And then Boise State, Oregon State. And the Broncos stay in pace with San Diego State as we enter technically the final week of the schedule, just because the week 13 has not officially been announced because they made that a flex week, and also there's only 8 teams in the conference, so every team's played each other, so they kind of just pick that final week who they think should match up. San Diego State, Boise State, both teams at 8-2 and 5-1 in conference play, so this would be a huge game, and I think the Broncos get the win there. Oregon State, I'm going to say, beats Utah State to be 1 game short of a bowl game. Fresno State, I think, wins against Colorado State, and then I say Texas State beats Washington State. So technically, these are my standing predictions, just because we don't have the final week of the Pac-12 schedule. So Boise State and San Diego State, I think, will meet in the conference championship game. I think they're 2 of the best schools in this conference, and it definitely is a competitive conference where I think a lot of these schools could compete. I just think they're the 2 best programs. Fresno State, I think, also could compete. They have Oregon State, Texas State, Utah State, Colorado State, and Washington State, which is crazy. Every school has state in their name, so you call this the State 12 if you want to, or the State 8 because of each school having it. But I think Boise State, they continue their dominance from the Mountain West to the Pac-12, which a lot of people think will happen, which makes sense given the fact that Boise State's the most consistent program out of all of these schools. And even last year, in their last year in the Mountain West, despite, having early losses and not really looking like the greatest, the greatest team, they still made it to the Mountain West title game, though that was very much due to weird tiebreaker rules and still won the game. Um, so yeah, so that is my Pac-12 um conference championship game, and yeah, and these are so far the conference championship games I picked. Um, it was Miami over SMU, Houston over Kansas State, Indiana over Oregon, Boise State over San Diego State, and Georgia over Oklahoma. Next week, we'll continue with the American um, BAAC, the American Athletic Conference, with along with the rest of the mid majors. So, hope you guys have enjoyed these videos. Hope you guys hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you guys can get updated for when I post any video as I continue to turn out videos throughout August and leading up to the season, which it'll be a big year for both the NFL and college football this season. So, hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to check me out on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Spotify. And until next time, hope you all have a great day and bye.